What's the president's reaction to the growing number of suggestions, both in this book and in the media, that he's mentally unfit to serve as president?
The same way we have when it's been asked before, that it's disgraceful and laughable.
The new explosive book, Fire and Fury, is giving lawmakers more momentum to question whether President Trump is mentally fit for office, they say. In one excerpt in The Hollywood Reporter, author Michael Wolff writes, quote, "Everybody was painfully aware of the increasing pace of the president's repetitions. It used to be inside of 30 minutes. He'd repeat word for word and expression for expression the same three stories. Now it was within 10 minutes. Indeed, many of his tweets were the product of his repetitions. He just couldn't stop saying something," unquote. A bill on Capitol Hill that could start a formal process to evaluate any president's mental fitness is getting more interest, with 56 co-sponsors, all Democrats. The Democrat who introduced the bill joins me now, Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. Congressman, thanks so much for being here. You and several of your Democratic House colleagues met with a psychiatry professor from Yale, Dr. Bandy Lee. She told CNN today, quote, "As the president is unraveling, he seems to be losing his grip on reality and reverting to conspiracy theories. There are signs that he is going into attack mode when he is under stress. That means he has the potential to become impulsive and very volatile," unquote. Did she say that to the assembled congresspeople?
Well, I think that Dr. Lee and other psychiatrists who've been up to meet with members of Congress have been predicting increasingly delusional and paranoid behavior on the part of the president. Of course, we're not mental health professionals, we're not psychiatrists, that's not our role, but we do have a very defined and important role under the 25th Amendment to the Constitution, which is to set up a body that could act with the vice president in the event of an emergency when the president becomes unable for mental or physical reasons to successfully discharge the powers and duties of office.
Sure,
so the bill just sets up the body that would be able to go to work if there were a real crisis.
But I guess one of the concerns would be a lot of these mental health experts, and we've seen them weighing in the New York Times and on cable TV and elsewhere. There was something set up in the mental health community called the Goldwater Rule, deeming it unethical for any mental health professional to give a professional opinion on a public figure who he or she did not personally evaluate. How could she say such a thing without examining the president?
Well, they're not violating the Goldwater Rule, which is incorporated into a lot of state bodies of law governing mental health practitioners, because they're not making a specific diagnosis under the DSM of the president. As I understand what they're doing, they're acting the way that any citizen has a right to act under the First Amendment, to say that they think that the president is dangerous and unable to successfully meet the powers and duties of office. And that's the constitutional standard. The question of whether he is a malignant narcissist or he has obsessive paranoid tendencies and so on, all of those are interesting and they might be relevant, but they're not definitive for the constitutional question of whether he's able to meet the duties of office. And of course, we've got big public policy crises going on now. We've got a gun violence crisis. We've got the tax bill, which was bought and paid for by the Koch brothers and the Mercers and so on. We got serious stuff to deal with, and instead we're caught up every day in what looks like the country debating the mental health of the president. So it's a very dangerous and unstable situation, as a number of Republican senators have themselves observed.
How can you be sure that your opposition to President Trump, because of his politics, because of his style, because of his, let's call them eccentricities, that's not clouding your judgment or that of the mental health professionals that you've spoken with?
Well, that's an excellent question, and all of us have politics, and all of us see the world through our own political and moral and ethical perspectives, and that's why the framers of the 25th Amendment, like Birch Bayh and Senator Robert F. Kennedy, said what we need is an independent body to be set up, and that's all that the legislation, H.R. 1987, proposes, to set up an 11-member commission, bipartisan in nature. Republicans appoint half, Democrats appoint half, the 10 members appoint a chair together, and they can only act with the Vice President of the United States, consistent with the 25th Amendment. I know a lot of people would like to read the 25th Amendment out of the Constitution, but every part of the Constitution is part of the Constitution, and we need every tool in the constitutional toolkit out on the table to get us through this very difficult period in American history.
Well, what you're proposing, the legislation, sounds bipartisan. It's 50-50 in terms of the composition, and the Vice President's in charge. But you don't have any Republican co-sponsors for your legislation, and though we've heard criticisms of the president from Republican senators and others, in terms of him being chaotic. I haven't heard one of them invoke the 25th Amendment or question whether he's mentally fit.
Well, actually, a lot have confided their real doubts about it. And if you look at some of the statements made by Senator Corker and but others in the U.S. Senate, a lot of Republicans have asked questions about whether there's an adult daycare center existing over in the White House and so on. But I'm trying to resist as much as possible just getting into the name-calling business. Obviously, there are a lot of things that are disturbing in terms of what's happened, like the president suddenly denying the veracity of the Access Hollywood tapes, which he had readily conceded to and apologized for just months ago. There's increasingly delusional behavior, it seems like, and erratic behavior, and he's more and more isolated even from his best friends like Steve Bannon, who are beginning to call him out in terms of his behavior. But the issue is, what is our institutional responsibility as the U.S. Congress? And we've got that under the 25th Amendment. Everybody should go and read it. Either the vice president can act with the cabinet in the event that the president becomes unable to conduct the powers of office, or the vice president in a body to be set up by Congress. And Congress in the last 50 years simply never set the body up. And so at the very least, we've got to set the body up so it's ready in the event of a crisis.